Hello, 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 everybody. How is everyone? Oh my gosh. I've been popping in and out today and seeing how much fun you guys are having. So many awesome classes. All right. Yes, creatively pooped, I bet, Tracy. Awesome. I'm happy that you guys are all here. Thank you so much for joining me. Again, I'm Jenn Shurkus, and I'm here teaching the Lawn Fawn class. I just wanted to mention, I know that Catherine will be in the chat under scrapbooking cards today, but also my friend Shari Moss, who works for Lawn Fawn, she'll be in the chat as well, helping to answer questions. She actually changed her profile photo to be the Lawn Fawn logo, so it'll be helpful for you guys to see, if she's helping answer questions. So are we ready to make some really fun fall thank you cards? Now, I say fall, but they could be all year round thank you cards as well. And you can totally adapt these cards to be different colors throughout the year. I don't know about you, but I think thank you cards, birthday cards, we always need them. There's never enough. So we're going to jump right into the screen here onto my table. And these are the 3 cards that we're going to be making. And so hopefully you guys had a chance to do the pre-class work. If you didn't, no worries. Maybe you're going to do the pre-class work and just listen to my teachings today. And then you can always come back to this replay and work on your cards as well. Because there is some stamping and die cutting for these cards, it's just helpful to get a little bit of that done before we jump right into class. I shared in your workbook what Copic markers I'm going to be using. Copics are alcohol-based markers. So you guys can be using any other brand of alcohol-based markers, or you can use this swatch list here to match it up to your other brands of alcohol-based markers, or colored pencils, or if you wanted to stamp your images on watercolor cardstock, maybe you're super inspired after Christina Warner's class, you can watercolor as well. Having these swatches will help you maybe match up similar colors to the coloring scheme that you guys are going to be working with. All right. So I had actually somebody email me and ask, why do I have my images all die cut first? Wouldn't it be easy to stamp color and then die cut? And of course it would. Of course I have water on my table. I just noticed. Of course, when I'm working on my own, I like to stamp, color, and then die cut out. But for the sake of class and having time to get all of the things done that I want to share with you guys today, it's much easier to pre-stamp and die cut. And as I mentioned in your class prep, which I also did a class prep video for you guys, but attaching your images to some low tack tape will just give us a bigger place to hold on to when we start coloring. All right, so I'm going to zoom in and we are going to dive right into start coloring the squirrels. I love it. Robin says that we're wearing matching shirts today. So it's like in between. It's a rainy day here on Cape Cod, and it's in between muggy and chilly. So I had a t-shirt on. Now I've thrown a long sleeve thin. It's a little too warm for a sweatshirt. I couldn't decide what to wear today. I couldn't decide. All right, so we are going to start with a couple browns. I'm going to be using a dark brown and a light brown. And I'm going to use the E37 as my dark brown. And I'm going to start right away by adding the shadow to all 5 of my squirrels. And then we'll go ahead and blend each squirrel individually. All right, so I'm going to start with, like I said, the E37, and I'm going to do just a little bit of brown under his belly. This is our little skipping squirrel. I actually was laughing to myself because I've been doing a lot of walking lately, And I literally was watching a squirrel yesterday do this type of squirrel leap across a really, really big yard. Um, and it was the cutest thing. I was like, you are so cute. So this little squirrel, as I went live, I realized he got a little water on him. So if he looks a little blurry, that's why. But I am going to make it work. Thank you guys so much for jumping in. Thank you for the hellos. I really appreciate it. So yeah, so I think Catherine mentioned on one of the evening lives, oh, maybe Jenn's mermaiding this weekend. I don't know, guys. Mermaiding might be over for the season. I'll have to be doing some winter mermaiding. It's getting a little chilly here, so it's so sad. But we do have beautiful, beautiful falls on Cape Cod, so I'm just enjoying that. So now we have our squirrel here. He's like, woohoo! He's totally throwing his hands up in the air and cheering on the fun that he's having. So I'm going to add a little shadow on the right side of his face, a little bit on that back ear, a little bit under his underbelly, around that leg that's swooping around. His whole back leg, bottom leg, is going to be dark brown. And then I'm just going to do a thin line along the right side of his body, the right side of his right arm. And then on his little left arm, we'll just do a little bit in his armpit. His tail, because it is a bushy tail, there's a lot of space. I'm going to kind of be a little bit more generous. Now, the reason why I chose the right side of him to shadow is because he's facing the left, and very rarely do we want to shadow the face unless we're doing like a spooky Halloween card, which I've been loving to do lately, but we usually want the face to be a focal point and not shadowed. So that's why I chose the right side of him to add the shadow instead of the left. I don't tend to worry too much about the direction of the sun or the time of day or the time of year. I just pick one side to shadow, and then I shadow that and the crevices. And so crevices would be armpits, under chins, hairlines, things like that. All right, so now that we have all of that shadowed on all 5 of our little squirrels right there, I'm going to go ahead and use the lighter brown, E33. And the first thing that I'm going to do is focus on blending the edges of where we added that shadow. So I'm going to zoom in even more so you guys can really see. So I'm actually going to work on this squirrel right here since this one's a little wet. I don't want that to hinder. I'll blend that one out next, but I want to show you one that doesn't have a water droplet on it. So if anything goes awry, it won't confuse you. So I'm taking that lighter brown and I'm just dabbing it on the edges of that darker brown. And so you can see I'm continuously dabbing until I don't see a line from the darker marker anymore. So what this is doing is blending, it's saturating the cardstock so that it's blending the 2 colors together, and it's thickening that shadow. And that's why when I first added the darker brown, the E37, I didn't add a lot of it because I knew that we were working in a smaller area, and by the time I get to this blending part, it's going to add a lot more shadow and thicken that up. All right. And so then you have a little squirrel that looks like this. So then I'm going to take that E33, the light, I'm sticking with that same lighter color, and I'm going to fill in the rest of the squirrel, 1 layer of this color. I'm not going to continuously go over it because if you're working with alcohol-based markers, if you continuously go over it, it's going to make that color darker and darker and darker. All right, so we did 1 layer of it, and you can see how it's much lighter than where our shadow is. Okay, But we also can see now that we have some awkward lines. And you're like, well, Jen, how do we fix those? So the way that we're going to fix those is I'm still sticking with that light marker. And I'm going to take that light marker and I'm going to start in the dark area and I'm going to swoop some color towards the light. So on his face here, I'm going to swoop some color from left to right. And what that's doing is making kind of an in-between color. It's softening that harsh edge, okay? And it's making an in-between color to blend between the lightest color and the shadow. So I'm just quickly swooping in between. All right. Now I'll tell you, on camera, my coloring always looks more splotchy than it actually is. But in real life, it's smooth. And you guys can look at the coloring guide too for, as we're coloring so that you can kind of get the gist of it as well. So now I'm going to move on to this other squirrel that's leaping through the grass and living his best life. And I'm blending out the edges of that dark brown, that E37. I can't believe I got my cardstock wet 2 seconds before I went live. These little guys have been stamped and die cut in clear bags for weeks and weeks now. Oh, you can't take me anywhere, you guys. Can't take me anywhere. This morning I did a live for Scrapbooking Cards Today in their Facebook group for World Card Making Day, and I forgot to put a mask down when I was ink blending. It's one of those days. One of those days. Thank you so much, Patty. She says, every time I take a coloring class from Jen, I learn something new. I love that. So now that I have that blended out, I'm going to fill in whatever's left white, one layer. And then I'm going to swoop my marker in between the 2 layers to soften those edges. All right. And then we'll move on to our leaping squirrels. So I always start by blending out the edge of the dark. And the reason why I don't color the whole squirrel, the light brown first, and then add some shadow and then blend it out, is because by doing it this way and leaving some white area, I know that that white area is going to be the lightest part of my squirrel, and I'm going to color that last. If I had color all over the squirrel, it would be really hard for me to keep track of where those lightest areas are, and I would just tend to keep coloring over and over the whole area. So that's why I keep it like this. And now I know whatever I see that's white, I'm going to color it just one layer. Keep it nice and true and light. And then I can always go and blend out those edges. Hopefully this makes sense, you guys. Now, coloring with alcohol-based markers, coloring with Copics can definitely be intimidating. Copic markers are not inexpensive. They are an investment. But like I tell people, they are a lifetime marker. They will literally last you a lifetime if you take care of them. And my approach to coloring is pretty simple, and I think it's a great way to start with alcohol-based markers so that you're not feeling too intimidated. And then after that, after you learn from me, you can graduate on. But to be honest, this is how I've been coloring with Copic markers for 15 years now. This is how I've been teaching with Copic markers for just as long. And this is just how I like to color with them. I like to try to keep it simple. I love to color, and I have fun doing it, but I just don't want to have to overthink it. And hopefully you guys are seeing how easy it can be. The browns are some of the easiest to color with. The warm grays are another really easy color to learn how to blend with. So I've moved on to the second squirrel. I'm blending out those edges, and then I'm going to fill in one layer, whatever's left white. We are going to color that really cute little tongue in his mouth in a little bit. And then I'll just soften any edges I have that are a bit harsh. Anywhere I feel that just needs a little help. All right. So Karen says, I'm not so good at staying in the lines. You know what, Karen? A little secret is when I teach live like this in my online classes, I go out of the lines all the time. And it's that because of the angle that I have to sit in, the way my camera's set up, and so that, you know, my head isn't hanging over the page. A white gel pen is your friend. Just use a little white gel pen and dab wherever you went outside of the lines, and no one will ever know. It'll just be our little secret. You, me, and the other 2,900 something attendees. Okay? White gel pen. And also, because you guys own this stamp set and die set from Lawn Fawn, if you don't like how something turns out, you can always stamp and die cut another, or stamp and color and then die cut, so that you have, you know, a little bit more space to hold on to when you're working at your own pace and maybe not trying to keep up with class. All right. So cute. I just love these little guys. Lawn Fawn critters always, always, always put a smile on my face. All right, let's see. So Copic markers have nibs, and it's all, they call their nibs all their styles, whether they're broad or brush or fine point. So I tend to use the Copic originals that come with the bullet point. And then what I did is I changed my broad point to be a brush point. And the brush point on a Copic original is smaller than the super brush that's on a sketch. And so I find that it's much more manageable, much easier to work with. If you guys already own your sketch markers, what you can do is change your broad tip, this one here, to be a little bullet tip. Super easy. Easy peasy. All right, we are going to move on to some sunflowers. So what we're going to do with the sunflowers is I'm going to actually have us just color the stems first on all of them. And so I'm going to use two greens. I'm going to use G19 and YG09. And I am going to take the YG09, which is my lighter green. And the first thing I'm going to do is just color all of my leaves. Just quick color. Try to keep it one layer, because we are going to add a little definition to those lines on our leaves. This is actually a perfect time where I could just use this little bullet tip. But we're just going to color each of these leaves one layer. Not the stems, just the leaves, with the lighter of your green. So I'm using that YG09. And I was just going to say something and I completely forgot, but I'm sure it's going to come back to me. All right. Yeah, that's what's great about the Copic markers is you can change your tip, but even more so, if your tip wears out, you can give it a new tip of the same. Like I just gave my E33 a new brush tip. You can see how nice and pointy it is. It was very loved. And so now I feel like I have a whole new marker. So now I'm going to take my darker green, which I'm using G19, and I am going to add the lines on the leaves. So I'm just tracing those lines, and then I'm going to color my stems. And so I guess we could call this like the lazy man's way of blending. Sometimes it's good to remember we don't need to overcomplicate our coloring. And these are really small areas, and we don't need to spend time doing all kinds of crazy, 2-color or 3-color blending, we could just use 2 markers and simply add some color, and it's going to look super cute no matter what. So I'm just coloring the stems and adding that dark green to the lines on the leaves. And we're doing this for all of our sunflowers, our small ones and our big ones. Jess asks, well, how do you know when it's time to refill your Copics? If you're having a really, really hard time blending and saturating your cardstock, if you hear scratchiness on your paper or squeakiness, definitely refill. And honestly, refilling is important because that'll help keep your nibs in good condition a lot longer, because you're not apt to press as hard or wear down on your nibs as hard if your marker is nice and juicy. Let's see. All right. So if I miss a question, feel free to make sure you're putting that word question all in caps first. That's really helpful. And I know my really good friend Shari is also chiming in the comments. She has the little Lawn Fawn logo as her profile photo to make it easy for you guys to see her responses. She is awesome. All right, so I am now going to color my sunflowers. And again, I'm going to keep it pretty simple. I'm going to use 2 yellows. A light yellow is Y15 and a dark yellow is Y17. And so I'm going to start with the Y15, and I'm going to color all of my petals, all of them. We're going to just go through and add Y15 to all of these sunflower petals. So Amanda said, question, do you have tutorials on how to change the nibs and add color to Copics, how to refill them? So I don't have a tutorial out there at this time. I do have a Copic 101 tutorial, which is really, really helpful, and I share my favorite 2-color blends, and the colors I think are good starter colors to start with. I know Shari can link that in the comments for me. But I do have an upcoming online Copic class. So I would just recommend to definitely subscribe to my email newsletter. And I feel like there's been times that I've shared how to refill Copics, whether it be on some of my YouTube lives that I do for Get Crackin' on Christmas. So I can always look and see if I can find a place and let you guys know. It's actually really easy to do. You just pull the nib out and put a new nib in. And to refill is pretty easy as well. Hi, Miss Libby, my trade show bestie from Hero Arts. Love her. All right, so we're just still using that light yellow and filling in all of our sunflower petals. Sunflowers are so fun. They can be used all year long. And I love coloring flowers, but I don't know a whole lot about flowers. So I like when it's like a flower I can easily recognize and know how to color. My neighbor down the street, he has a really cool butterfly garden in his front yard, and he keeps all kinds of different native flowers and plants and everything. I think Chris and I are going to try to grow some milkweed and stuff and help the butterflies since they're now on the endangered list. But he has been giving me, as I'm walking by a few times this month, he's been giving me a handful of dahlias to bring home, and they're so beautiful. I'm like, oh my gosh, thank you. So I think he's trying to enjoy them until we get our first cold snap. We haven't had one yet in the evening, so. I also find coloring really relaxing, and even kind of doing this where you do maybe pre-stamp and die cut a bunch of images, it's a lot easier for you to maybe go sit on the couch with your partner or a friend and watch a show and be able to color. You don't have to have a lot of supplies with you, um, or pre-color images and have them ready to go. So Karen said that she tried to refill one of her Copics and then she had exploding ink everywhere. Yeah, you want to be really careful not to add too much ink. And if you have the sketch markers, it's always good to take both caps off so that the air inside the marker can kind of equalize and they'll be less apt to burp on you. The Copic Originals, the square ones, don't tend to do that as much. But there we go. We've got yellow sunflowers. Oh no. Jennifer McGuire says her flowers have given up. Too cold. We've lucked out because we are pretty far out in the ocean here on Cape Cod. We don't get that cold snap as quickly as other places do. Hello, Gina. All right, so I'm going to take the darker yellow now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually trace the circle of the center of the sunflower. I'm going to actually zoom in for you guys so you can see. I know it's kind of hard to see yellow on yellow, but I'm just tracing that circle. That right there adds some dimension. And then I'm going to trace these petal leaves or petal lines, just like we did the leaves. So again, we don't always have to do crazy blending or have this crazy technique. Keeping it simple is really fun as well. So I'm just tracing that circle. We're going to color those circles in just a minute. And then I'm just adding a little bit of color to those petal lines. I wonder if Jennifer McGuire is already enjoying maybe a glass of wine before her little video later, calling me her hot friend. I don't know about that, Miss Jennifer. All right. So now I'm going to trace that circle even on these little guys, and then just trace those petal lines. So hopefully if Copic marker coloring or alcohol marker coloring is new to you, you're seeing how easy it can be. Maybe if you've been coloring with Copics forever, you're reminded that, you know what, we don't need to always overcomplicate it. We can keep it pretty simple and low stress. All right. And just so you guys remember, you have your coloring guide in the workbook, and I'm following that too, or trying to, making sure I don't steer far from that and confuse you. Zoom back out a little bit. So now we're going to do the centers of our Copics. And so I'm going to just use two browns. You can totally use the two browns that we used for the squirrels. I like to kind of switch it up and have different browns on a card. But if you are just starting your collection, using the same two browns is totally, totally okay. And so I'm going to be using the E25 and the E29. And we are going to do some two color blending. So I'm going to start by adding shadow to all of my sunflower centers. So on these little baby sunflowers, I'm going to shadow the left side. And on the big sunflowers, I'm going to shadow the right side. I'm actually mimicking where the little sunflower seed dots are. And so that's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to just do the left side, and I'm kind of doing like a little sliver moon. This is a little bit of a bigger area, so you can be a little bit more generous with how much color you lay down. Okay. And then on our big sunflowers, we're going to go ahead and do the right side. And when you're coloring a lot of the same images like this, adding all of the shadow first just kind of speeds up the process. But once we get into blending, you want to blend one area at once and get that one complete before you move on to the next, especially if you're using alcohol-based markers, because alcohol evaporates quickly and we don't want to have to overwork our paper to keep resaturating the paper. Question, does it matter how you store your Copic markers? Is it okay to have them stored vertical? Totally okay for you to have them stored vertical. If you go to my Copic 101 blog post, which I bet Shari has linked in the comments and I just haven't seen it yet, but you'll see where I store mine. I don't think, maybe if I go like this with my rolly, you guys can see it maybe behind me. It's in my rolly cart, and these are all my Copic markers. And I have them vertical, and they've been like this for, I don't know, 7, 8 years. All right. So now I'm going to take the E25, and I'm going to blend the edge. So I'm going to work on one sunflower at a time. I'm dabbing the edge of where we put our darkest brown, our E29. So that it'll look like this. Let me zoom back in for you guys. Okay. And then I'm going to finish filling it in with one layer so that it looks like this. And then if you have any harsh line, remember we can just flick that marker out to soften it. I see a few people are popping in late. No worries. You guys can pick up and start coloring your sunflowers. You can always go back and watch the replay, anything that you have missed. And then I'm going to follow the same steps on all of these sunflowers. So I'm coloring the edge, soften it so that I don't see a line. One layer of color to finish filling in the white. And then if there's a little line, you can flick out to soften the edge. I love it. We all have a hot friend. If you don't have one, then you are that friend. Too funny. Too funny. I think you guys are getting punchy. It's been a long, good, creative day. And especially if you were participating in all the classes yesterday. Oh my gosh, so much awesome stuff to learn. Yeah, so great. And today, you guys, is World Card Making Day. How awesome is that? Our own little hobby has its own little holiday. We don't have to share it with anybody else. And how perfect is it that this event is happening during that time? Thank you so much. I think it was Amanda that just said I'm helping her understand blending. I've been teaching with Copic markers for a long time. And, most recently because of the pandemic, a lot of my classes are online. But before that, all my classes were in person. And so I could really see where people were struggling, or maybe I was explaining something and it wasn't registering the way I was explaining it. So I would modify. And so it's been lots of years of learning how to teach you guys how coloring can be fun, right? All right, so now I'm going to take E49, which is a really, really dark brown, and I'm going to just dab the little dots that are like the seeds. I'm just kind of filling it in just to give it a little something, something. all the way down the row. We've got a good row of sunflowers going, right? And then the last thing that I forgot is my little squirrel's tongues. So for that, I'm just going to use a light pink. I'm going to use R11. You could use R20 if you wanted. That's a color I use a lot as well. But I am going to just dab a little bit on their tongue. Now, I also like to rosy their cheeks. I didn't in the coloring guide, but if you wanted to, you could take that R11 and just do a few dabs on their cheeks and add a little color. I just think it's really sweet. Not necessary, but, and you just gently dab. You don't want to press hard, especially with those handmade nibs, but just to add a little rosy cheek. Mary Lou. Ah, you guys crack me up. All right, so now I'm going to just gently take these off of my low tack tape. Now, this is the Spellbinders Best Ever Craft Tape, which is my favorite low tack tape. I'm going to keep this piece of tape now, and this is what I use to hold on my dies when I'm die cutting. I'm going to stick it to my phone mount for now. But so I don't find it wasteful that I'm using this tape to hold these images down, because I'm going to be using this tape over and over until it doesn't have any sticky anymore. And then I'll give myself some new tape. You guys are having too much fun in the comments. I love it. I love it. I love it. I will go back and check out the comments and make sure I'm not missing anything. And remember, we do have the question and answer after class. So if I am missing your question, I apologize. But I know I can see Shari in the comments as well, and she's doing a great job. All right, so we're going to set these guys aside, and we are going to do a little bit of ink blending. Now, if you're following the instructions in my book, in the workbook, my instructions, it's not my book, it's Catherine's and Kathy Zielski's amazing book that she designs. The directions are card by card, but we're going to kind of do some of the same stuff at the same time. So we did all our coloring, and now we're going to do all of our ink blending. So I also shared with you guys swatches of the inks that I'm going to use. You can be using any brand of inks that you would like. I am using Lawn Fawn's inks, which are water-based dye inks. So they're going to have a little bit of a softer, translucent blend. So if you were going to use Distress Oxides, which have a pigment property to them, your ink blending is going to look a little different. So, but I'm using number 2 pencil, which is kind of like a dirty yellow. And I mean that in the nicest of ways. I'm going to use freshly cut grass, which is a really pretty green. I'm going to use dough, which is a really nice brown. And then I'm going to use grape soda. Grape soda is just going to be to stamp a sentiment. So we're not going to ink blend with that one. A recommendation for grape soda to do in Distress. So Lindsay, I would not stamp with regular Distress, but instead of grape soda, if you wanted to stamp with a Distress Oxide, I think that you could use Seedless Preserves. You want it to match this pattern paper. And I think Wilted Violet isn't this. I think Seedless Preserves would match that paper the best. All right. So I am, like I said, we're going to do a little bit of ink blending, and we are going to do ink blending for all 3 cards at once. So I'm going to get my kits out. Got all my kits ready to go. And the first thing I'm going to do is take out my sunflowers and my leaves and my stems, all the little pieces. I just love this die set that you guys got this time. It was so fun to play with, and I hope that you guys have a lot of fun creating with it in the future. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and do my sunflowers first. The centers of the sunflowers I'm going to just push aside. And now we have our 3 petals, sets of petals of sunflowers. So for that, I am going to use, and I'm just going to move my ink pad to the one that I'm using. So I'm going to use the number 2 pencil. So kind of that dirty yellow. And I like to always add a little ink to my blender brush, tap it on my non-porous surface. So this is my tabletop is made out of glass. I think ink blending on glass works so beautifully. If you have not tried that yet and you struggle with ink blending, definitely treat yourself to a glass mat. And I am going to ink the edges of all these petals. And this is really going to make these sunflowers come alive. I think it just makes them look so realistic, so real, and so beautiful. Nancy says, can I skip coloring the squirrels and pretend they're albino? Sure, Nancy. It's your cards. You do you. You also could just color them with one color. You don't need to blend. You could just use one brown or one gray. And your cards are going to look fabulous no matter what. So I'm just going around and adding a little ink to all our edges. Ooh, that was a lot of ink because I forgot to tap off. This is what happens when I start talking on live and not remembering what I'm doing. But that's okay. It's a shadowed sunflower. Okay. And so then what I like to do is I have a little bit of rubbing alcohol in a mini mister, and I'm just going to spritz where I was inking with yellow. And I always have my very loved flower sackcloth in my lap, and I'm just going to clean that off so I don't get any other ink color on, my next pieces. And then we're going to do the centers of the sunflowers. And for that, I'm going to be using dough, which is that brown. Now, when I do this, I am only going to, I'm going to gently ink all the sides. And then I'm going to heavily ink one side so that it has a good, nice shadow to it so that it'll look like this. Yes, I love the ink stands. They're my fave. I don't use the rectangle ones as much because I use my distress inks so much. So I use the square ones the most, but I love them all. Love them all. I don't know where they've been all my life. So ink all the sides and then heavily ink one side of your center of your sunflower. So I like to just quickly go around all the sides, gently dusting, and then I'll really go into that ink to ink that edge. So mine is not a glass mat. Sandy asked, what glass mat am I using? My whole tabletop is glass. It's from IKEA and it sits on the Alex drawers. So I don't own a glass mat. It's probably the one thing that Tim Holtz couldn't sell to me. I think his glass mat is great, his tonic glass mat. But I don't need one. It's the one thing. He's good. He's the best enabler of them all. But yeah. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to take our leaves and don't stress about this too much. I know that these little guys are small and they're little pieces, but I'm just going to bring some of that freshly cut grass and I'm just going to touch the end of one leaf with some ink. Just like this. Okay? Don't worry about it. It's not meant to look perfect or the same as the other leaf. Again, adding a little bit of ink blending to your die cutting really makes it come alive and gives it a whole lot of dimension. And on top of that, using these papers from Lawn Fawn, which were the Spiffy Speckles and the Watercolor Wishes, those are pattern papers that they reprint over and over and they restock. And they're great staples to have in your crafty space, especially if you like to build scenes, you know, like having this color for grass and that color for a sun and this color for the sky. It really is awesome. And on their own, they're beautiful papers. And then if you want to jazz them up a little bit, adding a little bit of ink blend is a whole nother look. And so I just wanted to share that with you guys today. So again, I'm just adding a little bit of green ink to one side of those leaves. And then I'm just going to wipe my blender brush off on my two stems. Perfect. I'm going to move this all aside and clean my space again. All right. How's everybody doing? Good. Judy says I could be just as good. I have so much that I've been able to buy. Well, thank you. I take that as a compliment. All right. So now what we are going to do is we're going to ink blend a few more things. And so we're just going to take out, I'm just looking at my kit. We're going to take out this kit here that has our scripty hello. And we've got our two dotted rectangles. And then we have our scalloped rectangle with the diagonal yellow paper. And so let's go ahead and start with this diagonal yellow paper. And I'm just going to gently dust the edges with a little bit of that dough ink. Just a little bit of brown. Something about fall makes me want to kind of distress the edges of everything. I don't know. In the olden days, I've been card making for a long time. And I remember when Distress Inks first came out, and it was all just the variety of browns, which shocker that's what Tim chose as his first color. So variety of browns. We used to always, do you guys remember? We used to always take our ink pad and like fluff it on the edges. Yeah. Well, this is kind of bringing that back a little bit. Just adding a little bit of color to those edges. Our white dotted circle here, our white dotted rectangle, we're going to go ahead and add a little bit, touch of brown to these four sides. You really actually only need three sides, but we don't need to confuse you. We'll just do all four sides. Okay. And then on our green layer here, if you were holding it vertically, we only need three of the sides. I guess it doesn't matter how you hold it, but two long sides and one short side. We're just going to dust with a little bit of this dough ink. Sometimes I explain things and I'm like, that wasn't necessary. Why are we overcomplicating that? All right, so I did just the three sides of that green ink. Yeah, Kathy says she totally did that in her scrapbooking, right? Where we inked the edges. I loved doing that. Maybe I need to bring that back. Everything old is new again, right? All right, I think that is all of our ink blending. So now what we're going to do is start some of our assembling. So let's go ahead and work with this card since we have all of these pieces out. And this is the one where you guys stacked some of your scripty hellos to have a nice chunky embellishment. Again, remember I did do a homework prep video, so if you didn't see that, that's still available for you guys to watch, and you can get some really good tips and tricks on how to cut your dies apart and how I do my die cutting and all of that. So we're going to start by cutting our green paper so that it's 1¼ inches high. So it's going to be held vertically, and we want to cut off the part that we didn't ink, and we're going to go 1¼ inches high. So I've got my piece here, and this is not going to be used for anything, okay? I have a sense that I'm going to lose some leaves, so I'm just going to push these things out of the way. All right, so what we're going to do is I'm going to take one of my big sunflowers and 4 of my small sunflowers. And I'm also going to take one of my little squirrels that's jumping for joy, living his best life. Okay. And we're going to start to actually put our sunflowers down first. So the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to get my foam squares. And I'm not going to put my grass down first because I want to tuck my sunflower stems under the grass. So I am going to start by flipping all these sunflowers over, and I'm going to put some foam squares on the centers of these sunflowers. So I did kind of 2 on that big one and then 1 in the center of all the smaller ones. And I'll zoom in a little bit more since we are done with that ink blending part. So I'm going to go ahead and peel the backing off of my big sunflower here. And again, I don't want to glue my grass down because I'm going to actually tuck my stem under here. And remember, we can go off the side a little bit. Okay, because this is going to go on a card still. And then I'm going to go ahead and take one of my small guys, and he's going to go pretty low on the grass here and at an angle. Right? And then I was just thinking about how sunflowers like grow so high up. And so I wanted to really mimic that tallness. So I'm going to stick this other small one so that the stem ends right behind the big sunflower. So we don't really know that that happens, right? And then I'll take another small one, tuck it in. Really, this can be wherever you guys would like. This is your own little sunflower patch. And then this one here, I'm going to get right in there. Okay, so you guys can see I've got my floating sunflowers. And again, so fun that they all look different heights, even though they're all the same, right? So now I'm going to go ahead and just take my runner and put my grass down. And then I'm going to go ahead and take my little squirrel. And I'm not going to stick him down just yet because we're going to do a little stamping in the sky here. Now, when I'm stamping for anything I'm going to color with the alcohol-based markers, I like to use the Lawn Fawn Jet Black. And when you're stamping smaller images, I really, really love to have a smaller block. Lawn Fawn has this teeny tiny block that works really great. I am going to use my lovely Crop and Create block when I do my sentiments. But what I'm going to do is find my stamps, which are up here. And we've got this fun little cluster of stamps, leaves. So we're going to stamp those. And I'm not going to glue my squirrel down, like I said, not just yet. I'm going to keep it flat so that my block will be able to stamp down really nicely. And so I'm going to go ahead and ink up this stamp it above him. He's throwing some sunflower petals around. Okay. I'm going to ink it again and I'm turning the stamp and stamping it again. So far we've got 4 little sunflower petals. Now I'm going to clean my stamp. Make sure that there's no ink on there. And this time I'm going to only ink one of these petals, which I'm just I can see right through my block and inking on the corner of my ink pad. And I'm going to stamp one more time. Trying to figure out. And this is just a fun way. The designer in me has to have an odd number. And this is just a fun way to switch up how your images look just by selective inking. Okay. So I'm going to quickly take my Y17, which is the darker yellow, and I'm just going to add a little color to these leaves. He could also be throwing up the leaves part, the green, but I wanted him to be throwing up some petals. I just thought it was really, really cute. And then I'm going to stamp the little yay. So we've got a little wee and thanks, but I'm going to stamp a little yay. And when I'm stamping my teeny tiny sentiments, things I'm not going to color with, I personally really like to use this VersaFine ink. It stamps really nice and crisply. If you're new to stamping with smaller images, I'm looking for a piece of cardstock so I can just show you. If you're new to stamping with smaller images, do a couple test stamps to get a feel, because if you press too hard, they're going to look blurry. But if you have a nice, gentle hand, they're going to stamp nice and crisply for you. So that's what I'm going to stamp right above where we're going to put his little face. So cute. I love those little details. I think it can be a ton of fun. And so now I'm going to add him on with a couple foam squares. And that way you can position him however you would like under what he's throwing. Remember, his tail can go off the edge. And then I'm going to go ahead and use some foam squares to put this whole dotted rectangle onto the scalloped rectangle. I used the darker yellow, so the Y17. Monica says, "You're stressing me out. Where's my Misty?" You can most certainly use your Misty, you guys, but when you're doing smaller stamping like that, I just think it's faster and easier to use a block. And I also am from the dinosaur ages where I learned how to stamp when all there was in the world were wood-mounted stamps. So I honestly use my acrylic blocks for sentiments and that type of stamping all the time. I actually didn't get a Misty for the longest time until there were actual like techniques that I realized I wanted to be creating with my Misty, because I am just kind of that old school stamper. I know that I only look like I'm 25, but I have been stamping since the dark ages. So I'm using foam squares again to add this onto our orange gingham paper. You guys can choose either the diagonal side or the straight lined side, whichever you would like. And then we're going to add our scripty hello. And for that, I'm just going to use a little bit of glue tube. I put the stacking of it as homework because I figured we don't need to all do that together. But I did show in my prep video how I did that. And there we go. We have our first card. I do not have my card bases. I know those of you guys that take my classes are not shocked by this. Let me just try to find one card base to show you. Oops. Of course, I just dropped it. So let me try to grab another one. If I were to put this on a card base, I would put it on one that is a top fold. So 4 1/4 by 11, folded in half. And then this would just go right on there and open up. Okay. But I'll let you guys do that. So now we are going to move on to our next card. And for that one, let's go ahead and take out these pieces. Just going to move my inks out of the way. So we've got our purple pattern paper, and then we have another dotted rectangle. Okay. And the first thing that we can just do is go ahead and stamp our sentiments on this. So for this, I'm going to be using grape soda and dough. So I'm going to use a purple ink and a brown ink. And I like to stamp the scripty thanks first. So I'm going to use my good old Crop and Create block here that we got in our box. I didn't get a box, but Catherine was nice enough to send us some goodies. And I think I put in my instructions, I stamped this about 3/4 of an inch up from the bottom. You guys can go ahead and use your stamping platform if you'd like. I'm gonna eyeball it as I do. I am gonna do a quick test stamp though, because I'm like just nervous about being live. So you guys can see how my first one actually stamped a little splotchy, but then inking it and stamping it a couple more times, it smoothed out. That is very common with clear stamps, even this stamp that I've been using to make all of these cards. So that's why it is always a good idea to do a little bit of test stamping first. Whew, I was holding my breath there, you guys. I was definitely holding my breath. All right, then I'm going to take the word many from the stamp set. And I thought that this word many just fit really perfectly between the loop of the H and the loop of the K. So I'm going with it. Do a couple test stamps. I feel like I have. My problem is I don't clean my stamps very often. I've gotten really bad at that. I need to get back into the habit. Honestly, it's because I start creating and my stamp chamois isn't wet, and then I just am like, oh, I'll go wet it, and then I never do. So, all right, we got the word many in there. And then the little words that we're going to put around the squirrels, we will do once we get the squirrels in place. But we at least got our big sentiments done. Okay? So now what we're going to do is put together our sunflowers. So what I'm going to do for that is I'm going to flip these sunflowers over. And I think, yeah, there is a good picture of this in your workbook. But I'm going to go ahead and flip my centers over. Okay, so I'm looking at the backs. And I'm going to use these little foam squares. And I'm basically putting them on, half on the petals, half on the centers. So it's holding those centers into place. Okay. Yeah, Amarita says, I love how the word nested right in. I tell you guys, Lawn Fawn thinks of everything. And I love that sets coordinate with previous sets and things line up, and it's just really awesome. They do such a good job at that. You can pull out a stamp set that you bought from them 7 years ago and it coordinates. I mean, Shari, who's in the comments, she and I are obsessed with Happy Harvest, which is our scarecrow stamp set. We actually did have an online class all dedicated to him. And I use him every fall with whatever fall set comes out because it always coordinates. I just love it, love it, love it. We are going to put our stem on 2 of these. So I'm going to just grab my stem, flip it over. Whoops. And again, I'm just using a square to hold it on. I'll do that first this time because I almost forgot last time. I do this a lot where the foam squares are kind of doing 2 functions for me. It's gluing things together, but it's also popping things up. All right. So we've got 2 sunflowers with stems and then 1 hanging out. Karen says, I know why they say Genabler now. All right. So what we're going to do for this one is we are going to pop up this rectangle. Now, I am going to pop it up, and then at the end, I am going to do my tiny stamping, and I think it works out okay. If that makes you nervous, you don't have to pop this dotted rectangle up if you don't want to. But I also like to pop up all the things. Something I meant to mention at the beginning of class, I know quite a few of you were so surprised that there was no teal on my cards and there was no glitter. So I cannot wait to see the cards that you guys post in the album in the Facebook group. And if you post them out in the social media world, be sure to tag me as well. But extra credit if you work glitter into your cards or teal into your cards. I would love to see what you guys come up with. So I'm going to add this dotted rectangle down towards the bottom of the card so I have an even border on all 3 sides. All right. And I'm going to take one of my sunflowers with the stem. Whoops. I'm going to take all these backings off. And I want all 3 of my sunflowers to be a different height. Okay. So I'm going to start this one up pretty high, sticking that stem behind the dotted rectangle. Then I'm going to take my other sunflower with the stem. And I'm going to put this one kind of halfway up the card, like so. And then we have our third sunflower with no stem. And we're going to attach this to the card so that it's kind of hanging over the dotted rectangle. Really fun. Again, one element in a die, but we have it looking different all around. And then I'm going to start to add my leaves. And I kind of did this on these big leaves, I'm just putting a foam square in the centers. And then I'm just tucking them behind the stems. And wherever we ink blended that green, that's what's going to touch the stem. So just tuck it behind. This little guy is going to go up under and come over the dotted rectangle here. And then I'm going to do, for the small rectangles, or small leaves, I'm going to cut my foam squares in half. And you guys, your leaves can look however you want. And you can put all small leaves, all big leaves, less leaves, more leaves. Really, it's however you want them to look. But I just thought this was a fun way to decorate the sunflowers. You don't have to worry about placement. You kind of work that in as you're designing your card. And they're so easy to just tuck into place. And I love this one little sunflower in the center where it's like, so see that one I'm actually going to put flat. I started to put a foam square, but it's going to lay right on the dotted rectangle. So I'll just put a little bit of glue tube and tuck that in. So sweet. I'm going to add one more small leaf here. I want it to go behind the sunflower. There we go. All right. And so I have extra leaves, which is totally okay. Cute, cute. So then we're going to add our 2 squirrels. But before I add the squirrels, I am going to stamp my little words. So I know I'm going to put one little squirrel here. And I know I'm going to have one jumping off of the word thanks here. All right. And I'm going to use my teeny tiny block again. And so I'm going to stamp we. Thank you guys so much. Cassandra said she's concerned by the lack of sparkle, but she'll add some, not to worry. Thank you. Ranger has been so generous the past few Crop and Creates and donated stickles for us to use. And so that was awesome. But this time they wanted to do some different supplies, which is totally great. And so I was like, you know what? Everybody has a lot of glittering options out there. So maybe next time, if I'm invited to teach again, we'll just make that part of your supplies to have. Because I have a feeling I've enabled a lot of you guys to purchase Prisma glitter and a quickie glue pen. So, all right, I'm stamping thanks over here. Ooh, grab a snack, Sarah. Grab a snack. You can finish coloring later. And then we're going to go ahead and add these little squirrels to our card. So you can kind of have them appear on your card however you would like. I love this little guy here kind of sitting on that K and that S. And then we have our second card. And this will go on that same card base, you guys, like the 4 1/4 by 11. that, you know me, I'm really, really bad at putting my cards on card bases. All right. Third card. We're doing great, you guys. Doing great. So for this card, we have our dotted pattern paper. We've got a green scalloped rectangle and our yellow speckled scalloped rectangle. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to cut the green to be 1¼ inches high. We're making our own grass again. So along the long way, we're going to go 1¼ . Okay, you guys can save this big piece for another card. And along this green piece, we are going to stamp many thanks. And I'm just going to do this with black ink. So you guys know me, I'm going to use my acrylic block. I'm laying it out on my table the way I want to pick it up with my acrylic block. And I like to have that word many kind of go in the center of the word thanks. So if you guys are using your stamping platform, you can do that as well. And I'm just using my VersaFine black ink for this. Making sure it's inked. And this is going to fit right across. Yay! Brienne says we're all genetics. We'll include glitter. I love it. I knew you guys would. I knew you wouldn't let me down. I can't wait. Can't wait. All right. And then I'm going to add my sunflowers. So again, I'm not going to adhere my grass just yet. We've got our 3 small sunflowers here. We're going to add some foam squares on the backs of the flower part. Don't worry about those stems. And again, we're going to add these at a varying height a little bit. So I'm going to start with my somewhat one in the center, and it doesn't need to be perfectly in the center, but the one that's kind of going to start the show here. So I'm just holding that grass in place, and I'm going to tuck my stem underneath, but I'm going to put it as high as I can where it's hidden by the grass and it doesn't appear to be floating. Okay. And then we'll go ahead and fill in the ones on the left and the right at different heights. So this guy, I'm going to go really low. You can even go at a little bit of an angle if you want. Okay. And then we've got our third one on the right. And I'm going to have that one go over here. Let's make it a little bit higher, but not as high. Again, just switching up those heights a little bit. Once that's all set, I'll go ahead and attach my grass. Now, I know one question in the group was asking what a few dies were in the die set, and they were to rosy the cheeks of the sunflowers. I have some really fun samples to share with you guys that Kelly Marie, the owner of Lawn Fawn, sent me from the design team. So during our question and answer over on Facebook, I will share those with you guys. It's a Genabler alert because it's dies that weren't included in your kit, but at least you can see kind of how the dies were designed. All right. Now we have 2 little squirrels that are going to be added, but before I kind of add those, I'm going to stamp my little words. We're going to do a yay and a wee. I do this a lot too when I'm working in my studio. I throw one word on one side and one word on the other side. So I'm going to do a little yay over here. And then we're going to do a little we over here. Okay, put those stamps away later. And now I will add some foam squares to these guys. Now the running squirrel, the leaping squirrel, I think I'm going to tuck his tail behind the sunflower a little bit. So I'm not going to put any foam squares behind his tail, just to kind of make him look like he's coming out from the sunflowers. So cute. And then we've got our little yay guy. Put him over there. And then I'm going to add some foam squares behind here to add this to my background paper, which I have a feeling. Let's see. Oh, good. I have some more. I was like, I had a feeling I was going to run out of this size. All right. How's everybody doing? Brienne's over here making up new hashtags. I love it. So Amanda says, darn, I cut my green the wrong way. Well, two things, Amanda. You could just have a card going this way and just switch up the design a little bit, similar to this design, right? Or you could ink blend yourself some green and die cut another scalloped rectangle since you guys have that die. That's kind of what this Watercolor Wishes paper is like ink blended cardstock without having to do the work, right? Amarita's shopping for other class supplies for my classes while she watches. I love it. And there is our third card. And so this card will go on a card base that is 5.5 by 8.5. Horizontal card. Okay, 5.5 by 8.5. Melinda's having fun falling behind. Oh, I'm sorry. Remember, it's not a race. There's no prizes for first place at Crop and Create. All right, I'm going to scroll up a little bit and see if I missed any more recent questions. Let's see. Aw, thank you guys so much. Libby, oh my goodness, you didn't glitter all of the things. I know, it's crazy. Yeah, Shari said teal with fall and Halloween colors seems very on trend this year. I agree, Shari. Yeah, and so Stephanie asked, do you pop out all of the holes in the center? You most certainly can. These are the cards that I made for the original cards that I made for the workbook pictures and stuff. And this is the cards I did today, and I didn't really focus on that. I think both way looks is cool. Like it kind of looks like some of the seeds. I did a card that is posted today with new Tim Holtz dies where I left the window pieces in. It's just kind of a look. So it's whatever look you like. Both ways works really well. The die cuts them out really nicely, so that's not why they're still there. There is a scarecrow class. It's called, did we just call it Happy Harvest, Shari? I'm totally forgetting. We taught it last fall, but all of my online classes are still available to take. It was like East Coast Fawnies Presents, and we might have just called it Happy Harvest, since that's the name of the set. I'm just checking out your comments. Thank you guys so much. Yeah, it was just called Happy Harvest. Usually my classes now, I don't call them the actual stamp names because Kelly Marie, the owner of Lawn Fawn, and I, we teach free mini classes on Lawn Fawn's YouTube channel, and that's usually the name of the stamp set. So I went slower than my usual pace. Sarah, don't tell them secrets. Don't tell them secrets. Yes, Happy Harvest was in my fantastic class because he shows up every fall. Every fall. If we keep using him, Lawn Fawn will not discontinue him. So everybody go buy Happy Harvest with your Lawn Fawn coupon code. Yay! Thank you. My discount code for the Creative Chick Shop, it works on all previously released classes. Yes. So not my 3 classes this fall, but all previously released classes, you can get that discount. You guys did awesome. All right, you guys, I am going to stop here on YouTube because I don't think I missed any questions. I do want to give a little thank you, or actually a big thank you, to my friend Shari, who was here today helping answer questions. I knew while I was looking down and creating, I might miss some questions, and it looks like she did an awesome job at answering. She will not be over on my Facebook Live, but I think I'll be able to answer those questions okay. So I'm going to end here on YouTube, and I will see you guys over on Facebook. And if I missed any of your questions, I can answer them over there. Thank you guys so